All right, welcome back to some more Discovering Wes Moore. Once again, before we begin, I want you to take a second, remind yourself about what happened in Chapter 5 by answering these couple of questions. And after that, we will begin. So if you can answer those questions, that would be fantastic. All right, give you a couple of minutes here. All right, hopefully that was painless. Hopefully you did a nice job. Hopefully you got some good feedback, and we'll get those scores and the rest of these scores that we read from Chapter 6 here into the grade book. All right, so this one is called Chapter 6. It's called Refuge. So if you remember it last time, he was in Plebe. Now we're in Refuge. And let's see how his life has changed. Let's see how he is different now that he spent some time, maybe listen to his mom's advice as we get about halfway through this book. So Chapter 6, Refuge, and Discovering Wes Moore. Ding, ding. 2 bells rang through the mess hall. Signaling afternoon classes, the Corps moved en masse toward the cafeteria doors. I stood up from my chair and ordered my platoon to stand fast or stand still as I reminded them about the room inspection that was going to take place immediately after school. Yes, Sergeant, they responded, alert. They joined the flood headed toward the door. 3 years earlier, I'd been one of the lowly plebes entering the gates of Valley Forge for the first time. Now I was in charge of some of them. I was a platoon sergeant, a cadet master sergeant, and at age 15, the youngest senior non-commissioned officer in the entire Corps. The financial strain Valley Forge put on my mother had eased after the first year when the school gave me an academic and athletic scholarships. My mother was proud. She saw how I'd changed in starting military school. My back was straight and my sentences ended with sir or ma'am. One time when I was home for summer break, she walked in on me shining my shoes and was so surprised she started laughing. The school's motto, no excuses, no exceptions. And our honor code, a cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those that do. Were not just sentences we had to memorize, they were words to live by. With the support of my chain of command and the school faculty, I'd actually started to enjoy military school. These people made it clear that they cared about whether I succeeded. Eventually, their caring made me care too. Having people around me who believed that I could succeed made me want to succeed. I stopped in the mailroom. I'd got a letter from Justin. We exchanged dozens of letters after I left the Bronx for Pennsylvania. My leaving wasn't easy on either of us. We'd always been best friends. Once, our teacher at Riverdale pulled Justin to the side and given him a stern warning. Justin, you're a good kid. You need to stay away from Wes or you'll end up going nowhere, just like he will. Justin ignored him. This latest letter opened with some funny stories about school and my old hood, but a couple of paragraphs later, the tone became serious. 2 pieces of news took the wind out of me. First, Shay had been arrested on drug charges. These weren't simply running or possession charges either. Possession with the intent to distribute was a charge of a completely different magnitude, with serious sentences. Justin hadn't seen Shay around the neighborhood in a while and, from the sound of it, was not sure when he would again. The second piece of news was that Carol, Justin's mother, was dying. Over the past few years, she'd been moving more slowly and seemed just to beat off. They'd found out that she had Hodgkin's disease, a form of cancer. The survival rate is around 90% for those who discover it early. With his older sister away in college and his dad, Eddie, still down in Harlem, Justin's role in the family was changing. Man, every morning I'm at the school with Mom, he wrote. Every morning I'm at the hospital with Mom, he wrote. And then I'm off to class, late, of course. After basketball practice, I'm back at the hospital till visitors get kicked out. I'm trying to stay on top of everything, but it's too much sometimes. I don't know if I have time to be on the team anymore. My grades are way down low. Wes, I'm wiped. My heart felt crushed under the weight of his words. Even though I'd grown to enjoy military school, I still had mixed feelings, and they were eating at me. I felt guilty being away from everyone. If I were home, I could talk to Justin after he left the hospital. I didn't know what I'd say, but at least I'd be there. I wanted to be there for my mother and my sisters, too. They were moving back to Maryland, where Shawnee would begin high school. I remembered how tough Baltimore could be, and I wanted to be able to help out. I felt like being at military school was keeping me in a bubble, ignorant of the struggles on the outside. Wearing this uniform had definitely made me feel more clear-headed than I had been a few years before, but I wondered if it was just an illusion. Once I left the campus, the world outside would still be just as crazy. Would I go back to my old ways of thinking? H Company was broken up into 2 platoons. I was the platoon sergeant for one of them, and a cadet named Dalio was the platoon sergeant for the other. In the Army, there is an old saying that the officers make the orders, but the sergeants do all the work. This year, as a cadet platoon sergeant, I was learning how true that was. From the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, my day was spent thinking about my platoon, making sure my guys were doing well in class, making sure things were fine at home, making sure the building was clean, and on and on. I loved the responsibilities, but taking care of all of them was exhausting. Saturday evening after taps, DeLeo and I put our guys down to sleep, but still had a few hours free before we had to be back on campus. Want to grab a stromboli? DeLeo asked. A stromboli is essentially a pizza folded over on itself. A bread, cheese sauce, and meat concoction that was my favorite local comfort food. It was a good break from mess hall food. I was in. We threw on our dress gray uniforms with the navy ties and headed out. We strolled down the barely lit streets into downtown Wayne, gossiping about our platoons. About 10 minutes into the walk, a red Toyota with tinted windows slowly drove up to us. We figured the driver needed help navigating the dark, silent streets. We stopped and peered in. The window rolled halfway down, releasing loud rock music and the smell of alcohol into the night air. Behind the wheel was an overnight teenager with messy black hair and a scar across the top of his forehead. "What are you guys doing?" he demanded. "Nothing," I replied. "Who is this guy?" I wondered. "Don't you mean nothing, sir?" A voice rang out from the back seat because of the tinted windows. We couldn't see who'd said it. "Nothing, sir," I corrected myself automatically without even knowing who made the order. I was so accustomed to the rules on campus that it took me a second to realize I might be calling some random drunk kid from town, sir. "I'm Colonel Bose's son, and not only are you rude, but your uniforms are a mess. I'm going to report you both," the kid in the back seat said in a gruff voice. DeLeo and I looked at each other confused. What kind of prank was this? DeLeo leaned down to the window. "Well, you have our names, so do what you have to do," he said. The car sped away, leaving a trail of blaring music behind it. We continued walking down the middle of the street. "What do you think?" DeLeo asked me. "Probably nothing. Bunch of idiots." Then a speeding car came roaring up behind us. It was the same red Toyota, and it came within feet of running us both over. We turned around with just enough time to jump out of the way. The car slowed to a creep after missing us, like a predator waiting for its prey. It was only a few yards away from us. DeLeo and I got up from the side of the road, looked at each other, and broke into a sprint. Then the car sped away. Theo looked at me and said, "What are we supposed to do?" That was when the kid from the Bronx started to elbow the cadet sergeant aside. "We keep going to get our pizza," I told him. "They're done for the night, and if they aren't, we'll see them when they had the guts to get out of the car." DeLeo looked unconvinced, but he was still hungry. We picked up our pace as we walked in the shadows of the tree-lined sidewalks, now avoiding the center of the road. I felt like I was doing my speed walk to the subway in the Bronx again. There was nobody to be seen on the dark, open road. Every few minutes a car passed and made my heart stop. This was military school, I thought. We were supposed to be protected from this kind of stuff. After a few minutes, we were calmer, and our focus was back on getting that cheesy stromboli. We were crossing the intersection when I heard a voice yelling, "Go home!" N-word. As I whirled my head to see where the yell had come from, a rock or bottle, something hard, slammed into my mouth. "And I just got hit!" I yelled to DeLeo, and I spat out blood and pieces of my tooth into my hand. My tongue searched the top row of teeth, finding a front tooth that was now sharp and jagged. While my mouth filled with blood, the car had been sitting in wait for us with its headlights off. After their direct hit, the kids in the car flashed their lights and screeched off. The windows were low enough now for us to hear their screams of laughter. We moved to a completely dark area behind some bushes to regroup. Going to the pizza shop was out of the question. DeLeo, not panicking, said, "Bro, we have to get back to campus. Now." I reached into my mouth and wiggled my loose tooth. My mouth was aching. I was beside myself with anger and still confused and embarrassed. Embarrassed to have been called an N-word in front of my comrade, and embarrassed by my reaction. Because after being called that and having my teeth broken, I decided to flee back to campus. Should I have stayed there in the middle of the street waiting for the boys to come back, somehow gotten them out of their car, and tested them blow for blow? Part of me was shocked when I decided the answer was no. I'd only waited in the street life in the Bronx. I'd never dived into its deepest, darkest waters, but I've been around enough street cats to know the code. They hit you with the knife, you find a gun. The N-word was the ultimate fighting word. This was the kind of knowledge that was so deeply understood by all it never had to be said out loud. Still, I knew I had to let this one go. I had to look at the bigger picture. This was not a fair fight. The guys who attacked me were unknown, unnamed, and in a car. If I'd started a fight and won the fight, how would it have ended? After. And if I'd failed, how would it have ended then? The worst case scenario was more likely to happen than the best case scenario. DeLeo and I sat silent for a moment, waiting to see any lights or hear any noise. Then again, as we just learned, darkness and silence did not necessarily mean safety. "We have to get back to campus by a different route. No lights, no streets," DeLeo said. "I know where to go. Follow me," I said, and I began to run through a series of front yards to a dark, empty field about a quarter mile away. DeLeo was trying to ask me where we were going, but I never slowed or turned around to explain. There wasn't time. Crouching behind trees and cars along the way, we moved closer to our goal. I thought this uniform gave us security, but here we are, hustling through dirty fields and grassy yards in our black dress shoes and stained wool pants, our hearts pounded under our heavy navy blue shirts. Where are we? DeLeo asked again, and we stopped behind a large rock, staring at the wooded landscape in front of us. It's the field that leads us back to school, I replied. This was our chance to get back on campus without having to meet up with our attackers again. DeLeo had never been here. Most cadets never had a reason to wind up in these woods. I had, however. In fact, it was one of the first memories I had of this place. This was the same area I'd run through trying to find the Wayne train station, trying to escape. We bolted into the woods. We navigated the darkness holding on to trees, using the moon as our guide. Minutes later, we saw the light from the cross perched on the chapel's roof only 50 yards away from our barracks. The irony of the situation forced me to smile, despite my newly cracked tooth. Years earlier, I had run through these same woods with all my might, looking for safety, trying to get away from campus. Tonight, I was running through the same woods, looking for safety in the other direction. Go back to the chapter title. It's called Refuge. Think about how Valley Forge, the school that he was in, has changed from this horrible place he wanted to leave, run away from, to now a place of refuge. And what do you suppose our author is trying to teach us? What's his main idea?